Hey writers, so today is a pretty exciting day because today we get to take a look at these cross-generational interviews that you did and actually start to work on taking them and making them into something. So you are working on this because you did an interview with a family member or a person in your life who you think represents a hero and a part of Black history. You ask questions like, what does Black history mean to you? Why do we celebrate Black History Month? What leader in Black history has influenced you most? Do you think race relations have improved since the civil rights era, etc.? These were questions that you came up with, and they were some really great questions. After reading through the interviews, I can truly say that there is some amazing, amazing history preserved in the work that you did. So now you're going to actually get to take a look at this interview, and just like you're a reporter or a journalist or a writer working on a nonfiction book, you're going to start to pull out some of the interesting details from what you interviewed the person about and start to think about what you want to save for your own writing. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my interview that I did with my grandfather, and we're going to talk about how I could take some details from that and actually start to reflect on them. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to sit down and I'm going to reread my interview. So I'm going to start from the very beginning. I'm going to read the questions. I'm going to think back to and picture the person I did it with. I'm going to read through the whole thing. So I'm not going to read it to you out loud right now, but I want you to take a minute, pause the video, and read through your entire interview. Go. Okay, so welcome back. You probably just had a pretty interesting experience looking back at this interview. A lot of the work that you all did was really amazing, and it's going to be interesting to hear what your thoughts are after you've read your interview. Now what you're going to do is you're going to begin to reflect on what you wrote. So this is your interview reflection page. You're going to make sure your name's on it. So my name is Sam. I'm going to write that. And now I'm going to start to think through all of the details of what I learned. First it says, to learn more about my family's connection to Black history, I interviewed. In this case, I'm going to say my grandfather, and I'm going to write his name, my grandfather, and then underneath it I'm going to write Donnie. Okay, so now I'm thinking about this person, I'm picturing what it was like to interview them. Now I'm going to go on to these next questions. It says, two interesting things I learned were. All right, so this is where I might actually want to go back to the interview and start to think and highlight some interesting things. So I'm going to go back through my interview and I might even underline some things and write interesting next to them or whatever it might be. I want you to go back to your own interview and I want you to actually start to underline at least two interesting things that really stood out to you that you think you would have never known if you hadn't interviewed this person. Pause the video, go back and read through your interview, and I want you to find at least two interesting things. Go. All right, so you came up with your interesting things. Now you're going to actually write them down. So I'll share with you one of the interesting things that I learned. So I learned that my grandfather actually had to leave town because he was a Black man and he had had a son with a white woman. And I learned that interracial marriage was still not allowed when my dad was born. So interracial marriage means marriage between people of different races. So I'm going to write down that interesting thing that I learned. So I'm going to write, I learned that interracial marriage, and I'm going to do my best to spell it, and then I'm going to write interracial marriage or marriage between people of different races was against the law when my dad was born. I didn't know that before I interviewed my grandfather. Awesome. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to write down that next interesting piece of information. So pause the video, give yourself some time to write down those interesting pieces of information, and then we'll move on. All right, so you wrote down those interesting pieces of information. Let's go through the next things you're going to write out. Each time you have a new question, I want you to go back and look in your interview to find that. So the next question is, I was surprised to hear that. I want you to think about something you were really surprised to hear in the interview. And I don't want you to just remember it. I want you to go back to the text of your interview and think, what's something that I was surprised to hear? Pause the video, go back and find it. Great, so you should have written down now what you were surprised to hear. If you haven't done that, pause the video and do it. The next thing that we're going to talk about is how it made you feel to interview this person. This is personal stuff. We're interviewing people about the history of an entire group of people that really have not been given equal rights for the entire history of our country. I want you to think about how it made you feel. Maybe it was something that was a really exciting feeling for you. Maybe it made you feel sad. Maybe it made you feel hopeful. Whatever it might be, I want you to take a little time to think about how it actually made you feel, and then I want you to write why it made you feel that way. Pause the video, go ahead and do that. All right, so let's just quickly take a look at some of these other questions that you're going to take some time to write about. The next one is I still want to know more about. I want you to actually think, what are the things that you didn't learn in this video, in this interview, and what do you want to know more about those? To learn more, I plan to. Now, this is something that all great writers have to do. They do research, they go and they look at the information they have, and then they think, what else do I want to know about? I want you to start to think, what do you really want to learn from this person? Because you are going to get a chance to go back and talk to them again to learn more about it. So pause the video and write a little bit more about what you plan to do to learn more. Okay, now finally, I want you to take some time to actually think about how this makes you proud. We all have a little bit of history in our own families, and you've had an opportunity now to talk with somebody who's important in your life, or maybe somebody who you just got to know, and learn something. And there's something to be proud of in there. I want you to take a little time to think about what you are proud of. All right, so now you've written your interview reflection, and the next step is that you're going to actually get to start writing a nonfiction piece of writing about the Black history that exists in our own neighborhood, because there's so much of it. And so many times we forget that there's history right in front of us because we're paying so much attention to the people whose names are known in history books. But really, when it comes down to it, the most important history is the history of the people around you and the great leaders that are in your own neighborhood who make the world a better place to be in. So take a minute now, and I want you to read over your interview reflection, because tomorrow you're going to get started working on writing a nonfiction piece about this person that you interviewed. Enjoy.